Welcome to the Mission Minded Podcast, and we are so excited you are tuning in with us today. I am your host, Rachel Miller, and I have the privilege of leading this podcast with my best friend and co-host, Bella Comfer. Our mission is to fulfill the Great Commission by bringing our listeners closer to Jesus through each conversation. So let's jump right in.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Mission Minded Podcast, and today we're going to be talking about the problem of evil and what that means for us as Christians. We're just going to jump right in. So we're recording this episode on September 14th, and this week in our nation there's been a lot of stuff happening. There's been multiple shootings, a stabbing, the assassination of Charlie Kirk. It's kind of been a crazy week in terms of the things happening. And I know Rachel and I have been talking a lot about everything going on, and it's been pretty heavy and heavier than we really even thought that it would affect us. I feel like in our society, like, there's so much violence, we're almost like desensitized to it. Yeah. And this week has really like impacted us more than we thought it would. And so Dr. Einstein, as we like think about everything that's happened this week, and the fact that specifically someone who dedicated their life to like spreading truth and the gospel was essentially murdered for that.
A martyr.
Yeah. How do we respond to that as Christians? Because like my initial response was like anger. And then the more I thought about it, the more it just like broke my heart. And to see online, like even people who claim to be Christians justifying someone's murder because of what they believed. Like, I don't know. It just seems like a lot. And like, how do we respond to that? And what do we make of all of this? Because we are talking about evil, and it seems very relevant to what's going on in our world.
Well, yeah, there's so much there to unpack. I think kind of in the aftermath of everything we're living in right now, all the emotions. My youngest son was a real listener to Charlie Kirk, and then it hit him probably harder than the rest of my family, just because I've listened to quite a bit of him, but wasn't like a true like follower of him. And listening to his wife's monologue a couple nights ago with Suzanne, was like, wow, here we have this act of evil that took out a husband and a father, and these two little kids will never know their dad. And how does she grieve the loss? And I think that's a nice segue into, or an appropriate segue, not about nice, but an appropriate segue into the problem of evil. Now, I've been studying, teaching, working with students for over 30 years in the apologetics arena, trying to establish worldview, trying to help students see, what is the best way to live? What is what? And we've gone through ontology, we've gone through justification of blood, and so we did some amazing things with this podcast. So thank you both for committing to this, because I think this needs to be out there.
Yeah, and the people that are listening.
Yeah, 100%.
Them so much.
Yeah, that you're following along and giving us, feedback. I think it's really important for us to have feedback on this. And I think the two biggest questions I get, and I have received and have had to work with students over the years, is the problem of evil, and then this whole predestination thing, which is a completely different story. And so when we go back to evil, the first thing I ask anyone in this conversation, we talk about the problem of evil. And even in that question or that statement, we have to break that down and say, what is the problem? What is evil? Because oftentimes we bring this out in conversation, and I'll be honest with you, I think a lot of people hide behind it as a crutch to not really jump in. Yeah. Because I believe, and we're not going to reinvent, let's just be honest. I mean, we've been struggling with this since Augustine, since the I would go back towards the Gospels, and even the Greeks wrestled with it. I mean, we're
not going to all of a sudden have the answers today.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So listen to this podcast, and you'll never struggle with evil again.
Hey, listen to us, and you'll know everything.
Exactly, right? We're going to nail this thing once and for all. So I think people that are really, truly struggling with the problem of evil, there are great helps out there. I mean, just read Brothers K by Dostoevsky. You're gonna get probably one of the best theistic responses to the problem of evil. Who wants to read through that? Who's really going to discipline themselves to really read Brothers K? Dostoevsky's Brothers Karamazov. It's a classic in the higher thinking world. Okay. I mean, it deals because in the book he gives multiple examples of true evil. Mm-hmm. I mean, true evil, right? Mm-hmm. We like to, and then, again, back up. I won't get too ahead of myself. But in this conversation, I ask students or people that are truly struggling with the problem of evil. What's the problem? What's evil? Going back to that. And so when I ask them, give me a definition of evil, right? And here's what we need to understand. There's a difference between evil and pain and suffering. Okay? Pain and suffering is what happens to us.
Okay. Evil
is what happens within us. So to understand that, what then is evil? Evil is as I would define evil, or as I would ask someone to define evil. Give me a definition. Give me an example of evil. Mm-hmm. And so you know oftentimes we end in the Hitler conversation, right? Oh yeah, Hitler, that's evil. X number, tens of millions of Jews. Of course, that's evil, right? Mm-hmm. Believing that a group of people is less than, therefore we can wipe them out, and justifying it that way. Or you can bring up Mao or any of these people that have gone on and actually killed so many people. But when you press someone to say, what is evil? Mm-hmm. And this goes back to Augustine. And I think Augustine was spot on. How many decades ago or millennia ago was that? Augustine would say, we really don't have evil unless we have ultimate good.
And what do you mean by that?
You can't. If I were to hand you a warped 2x4 warped board, mm-hmm. and I ask you, tell me how you know this board is warped, right? And I actually used to carry around a 2x4 to do this exact thing with students because I want them to see it. And they'll pick it up and they'll look at it and tell me why we know this board isn't straight, right? Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, because I can see it. Mm-hmm. Great. What are you seeing that why with your sight do you know that board's not or that it's not straight? Well, because it's not. I can see it. But what are you seeing? And they're like, well, I don't get what you're asking me. How do you know the board? Well, because I can see it. But why? Why do your eyes pick up that it's not straight?
And like, why do your eyes view it that way?
Exactly. You're telling me how, but why? I want to know why you know that board is crooked or warped or whatever, right? And so you keep pushing back on that, and finally it's like, well, because you're comparing it to something that is straight.
Right.
And they're like, well, but what is that? You tell me. What are your eyes picking up, looking at the curvature of that board that tells you that it's crooked?
Like, we know it's crooked.
We know it's crooked because I see it, right? And ultimately it boils down to, because the way light is hitting it, it's making shadows. Mm-hmm. And our eyes pick up the light and the shadow, and we say, okay, it's crooked. Well, then what is light, right? Light is true. Light is straight. Therefore, the light casts a shadow on the crookedness and tells me that it's crooked. So my eyes actually are able to discern the wrong or the crookedness because of the straightness of light. So
that's interesting,
right? So we only have.
I haven't heard that example from you.
Oh, you haven't?
That's new for me.
Okay, well it's a good one because it's fun to have a class or a student wrestle with it because they're literally touching the board and they're looking at it. I know my eyes, but you still haven't told me why. Yeah, you're telling me how your eyes are picking it, right? That's important. And so if you go back to Augustine would say, look, if there's no ultimate good, nothing is ultimately evil.
Yeah.
Right? And so,
because then there's nothing to compare it to.
100%. There's no morality. This goes back. Some people that have studied philosophy or just this question of worldview, you have the is and the ought problem. Just because something is doesn't mean I ought to, or just because this is doesn't necessarily mean I ought to follow. Right? If you say don't, you're making a moral judgment. You're saying, I believe this to be true, therefore don't step over the boundary. Mm-hmm. When you say don't, you say there's a line there to cross over. And living in this crazy existential world that we live in, that everybody says, well, you do you, right? You be you. How dare you step on my boundaries or tell me what to do? Yeah. But yet the minute you cut them off on the freeway, the minute you do something wrong, then they borrow against an is-ought world. They borrow against a worldview that's not theirs and say, you can't. And you say, why not? Because if you're telling me I can't, that means there's a can't. There's got to be something that's saying don't do this or this is bad. When you go back to evil, I personally, of all the arguments, the theological, cosmological, I can go into all of those and I love them all. But I honestly believe the problem of evil is the best proof of God. Because if no God, then no evil. And that's really important.
Right.
Because if I'm an atheist, feels good, do it, right?
Yeah.
If I'm an atheist, I'm going to be a hedonist, and if I have to step on you to get there, great.
Yeah.
Sucks to be you, but there's nothing that tells me that I shouldn't, unless I borrow against a worldview that says I shouldn't. And so and truly atheists don't live in a consistent atheistic world. They borrow against another worldview. In fact, they borrow against the theistic worldview.
Right.
They can't live perfectly in their little bubble, because even taking a test, everyone should be able to cheat and every answer should be fine. And if you get a 0, good for you. You should get the exact same grade, because there's no standard.
Right, because it just boils down to essentially cultural and social norms rather than right and wrong if there is no God or no higher power.
You got it.
Yeah.
And that's what Augustine would say one of the best proofs for God is the problem of evil. So that concept of then what is evil, right? And we know what evil is. Again, you can read Brothers K, or you can just look around the world. But like when my dad drowned when I was 17, was that evil? No, it wasn't. It wasn't an evil act. Right? It hurt, it was pain and suffering through me, but it wasn't evil. Evil is something that is a moral choice that I do against someone else. Okay? If I cut you off on the freeway, I have chosen that your bubble of your world is less than my world. It's more important for me to violate you and get in front of you on the freeway. Right, I have made a moral decision that my way is better than your way, that my life is more important, my time is more important than yours, and that is a decision I made against you. Yeah. And you can take that to the nth degree, where your life isn't as important as my life, therefore I'm going to take your life. Or this people group is not as important as our people group, therefore we're going to eradicate that people group, which would be the Hitler example. And you look at the SS, they actually used to, and this is kind of a sobering thing, they used to actually take people and use them for target practice and things like that. And I remember, and this is something very sobering, my sophomore summer of high school, my grandparents paid for my family to do a European tour, just as a family, and we got to visit Auschwitz and Dachau are two of the death camps of World War II. And I remember going through Mauthausen Mauthausen and Dachau, not Auschwitz. Auschwitz was in Poland. We didn't get there, but Mauthausen, they had a museum in the concentration camp, and I remember walking through it and seeing the actual artifacts of what the Germans were doing to the Jews. And I just remember something deep down inside, and I'll just give you one example. I could give multiple. But I remember in the museum there was a lamp, and it was lit, and you're looking at it, and you're just like, okay, why is there a lamp in the museum? And it wasn't just a lamp. When you looked at the shade of the lamp was actually the skin of the Jewish victims that had tattoos. And they skinned them, and they cut it, and they cut it off, and they threaded it all together to make a lampshade out of human skin, right? And you're like, okay, there's something about that. As a kid, as a sophomore in high school, I was just like, that is just evil. That is just wrong. There's something absolutely morally wrong at the core of me I shouldn't be looking at a lamp made out of human skin, right? Yeah. So we, even in our own world, we know that is not right.
Yeah.
And then the question is, why is that not right? Because there is better.
Yeah.
There is a standard by which that is morally and that is ethically, that is wrong. And in a world that we live in that doesn't really want to define right and wrong, because how dare you violate my existentialistic beliefs of me be me, we don't want to say that that's right or wrong. Yeah. And it's clear from this past week that there is right and there is wrong.
Yeah. Well, I feel like it's also clear in Genesis with the fall and Adam and Eve, because, I mean, God said, don't eat of the tree of knowledge, because you'll know the difference between good and evil. Yeah. Up until that point, they didn't know. Yeah. And then that's how Satan, who I would say is the source of evil, tempted them to be like, you need to know this. Yeah. And it comes back to even just the things that are happening in this world right now. Like, I was not meant to see what I saw this week. Yeah. And I think it was something that even Adam and Eve weren't supposed to know. So, anyway.
I'm with you. It's been that kind of week for me. I've walked around the house with shedding tears, of feeling like this pit in my stomach. And I even had a student in one of my lectures say, Dr. Anson, can we just take a time out? Yeah. I didn't know this person, but there's something inside of me that hurts so bad and is grieving. And what is that? Why do I feel like I'm resonating with the loss? Right. And I think it's that cultural, we're in a cultural shift of where the right is wrong and the wrong is right. Mm-hmm. And people who see that, no, that's just wrong. What do? How do we align with a family? How do we align with someone who lost their dad and say, I understand this was wrong. This was evil, true evil that we saw this past week, right?
Yeah. Whether you agreed with him or not.
Exactly. This was evil. And then you see all the other people that are like, he deserved it. And you're just like, where are we as a culture where our differences have to be taken out in hate and anger and death and killing and murder instead of just normal debate and talking about, we used to, when I was growing up, it was Democrats and Republicans, and we had a cordial conversation about the size of government, and some believed it should be big and some believed it should be small, get it out of my life. And we had Democrat, Republican, healthy conversation, right? But to that point where we are today, where it's hate and anger and evil and killing and murder, and because you differ in your beliefs, we're in a very different place. And I personally believe the only answer to that is we're in a spiritual battle. Yeah, this 100%. Is not, as Paul says, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. This is not a flesh and blood argument. Oh, no. This is purely evil from a different realm, from a different domain. Now, you brought up something that and I wish we had time because I know we're going to jump into science here coming up. Yeah. Someday, if there's time on the podcast, if there's interest, we should go into the three falls, the three rebellions. Yes. It's not just the Genesis 3. There's the Genesis 3 fall or rebellion. There is the Genesis 6 rebellion, and then there's the Genesis 11 rebellion. And we need to understand all three of those rebellions got us to the cross. Okay, got us to where we are at the cross and atonement. But I'm going to save that for out there if there's interest. But the three rebellions should be talked about in context of what Jesus really did when he went to the cross and went to the grave and was in the grave for 3 days. But back to evil, I think once we define something as evil, we have to ask then why. Why is there, if loving God, this is the question ad nauseum that is asked. Why do we have a loving God? If there's a loving God, why do we still have evil? That's one of the ones I think for
that's what I was going to bring up, because I feel like I hear that most often, especially in school. I feel like I heard that a lot.
Yep. And I'm going to be honest with you. I have been asked that in my, I guess you were part of Free For All Friday, the conversations that we get, it's to the point where I've now said, do you really want to answer that? Because what happens, I think so oftentimes, as I just mentioned previous, is we hide behind those questions. We're afraid to actually do the scholarship to jump in and actually resolve the tension that's within my own soul and figure it out, because there are good answers, right? You guys, you've read Timothy Keller. He's got a great, Pain and Suffering is a great book. He talks about the problem of evil in his book, Pain and Suffering, and he's probably one of the better overview of the problem that I've ever read, right? And so, yes, but who really wants to take the time to read a 400-page book? And
it is deep.
It's deep, but there is tangible answers. So what are we going to do in our time with the podcast? I think it's important for us to realize why evil. Why is there evil if God is a loving God, if God is real, if we really follow this loving God, and we're theists, not deists or atheists. And by the way, I will just say this: if you're an atheist, there's no problem of evil. So if you're an atheist, please don't ask the problem of evil, because you've borrowed now against a worldview that has God. So if you're going to be consistent with your atheistic worldview, then get over evil. Right. Yeah. Begin. There's no evil.
You shouldn't believe it exists.
There isn't such a thing as evil, because there's no perfect standard or moral standard or good standard by which anything is based on or relative to make something evil. But if you're in the deistic or the theistic worldview, why evil? And this is what I would love to spend, probably the remainder of this podcast fleshing out, because I do think we have to understand with creation of humanity why it is that you and I have the ability to do evil. That's really important. So if we go back to the original creation had the animal kingdom first. It actually, and we know from Job 38, and you can read it if you want, but from Job 38, we know that the angelic class of beings, the Bible calls them Elohim, by the way. I'll just say that because that would where we would move into. The Elohim were there. The sons of God, the B'nai Elohim, were there when God created and laid the foundations of the world. Okay, we're told that in Job 38. I believe it's, I don't know if you want to read it. I think it's 11. It's like, I want to say.
Yeah, I was like, I'm trying to find it here.
It's the. I could probably dig it out.
I was like, I'm trying to find it really quick. Verse 4 says, like, where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? Or stuff like that. But I feel like it's
Job 1. I'm so sorry. It's good.
Oh,
no. It is 30.
No,
it is 38. I'm so sorry. I'll find it here real quick, and we can. Yeah, it's 38:7. Sorry, I had to just go to my own Bible. I'm such a slave to my. So read it in your translation.
Mine just says, when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy.
Yeah, so start back up.
In 6?
Yeah, just read 38. Just read 38. It's good.
It'll make more sense if we just do it all together.
Just read 38. Yeah, it's actually beautiful.
Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, who is this that darkened counsel by words without knowledge? Dress for action like a man. I will question you, and you will make it known to me. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? On what were its banks sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy.
Okay. So who's around the sons of God? They're shouting for joy as the foundation of the earth is being laid, correct? Sons of God are the B'nai Elohim. This is the class of angels that we call angels, we call demons, we call Satan. They are a class. The word Elohim, by the way, is a term for a bodiless being. It's a class of being. Okay, it's not, God is sometimes referred to as Elohim, but God is specifically Yahweh. Now that gets into, like I was saying, the three rebellions. We have to flush that out. There's a lot more to it. But right there, you're seeing that, okay, there was this class of being that was around when the earth was made. So the three classes of being we've already talked about. You have the Elohim, you have the humans, and you have the animal kingdom. So in the original creation, you have the animal kingdom. In the animal kingdom, they were animals because they were not made in the image of God. They are very different. God could not have a relationship with a cat or a goat or a snake. So he said, let us make humans in our likeness. So here we are. We're going to be made in the likeness of God. One of God's attributes that's massively important for us to understand is his freedom. He is 100% free to do what he wants to do. Praise him that he is a good God, right? He is a God of love, and therefore he is a loving being, and otherwise we should be out of here because we've messed it up so many times. But he said, we, being the Trinity, is going to make this class of being in our image. And since I am a being that has free will, or I have freedom to do what I want, I'm going to make a class of beings, not the animals, but the humans, to be free. So you and I were created in the image of God, and one of the attributes is that freedom. That freedom means that I can freely choose right from wrong. So what the verse you brought up, Rachel, in the original creation, we were created to be in his image, in his presence, going to him for right and wrong. And we would have knowledge from right and wrong by going to him.
Okay.
Satan comes along and tempts and says, don't trust him. You don't need him. You autonomously, in your own reasoning, can reason your way to right and wrong yourself. Without having to go to him. You don't need that. And that's why he questions God. Did God say, right? He questions what God said, the revelation part of it. Trust in yourself. And that's exactly where we're at today. It's no different than where we're at today. Were you going to?
Oh no, I was just breathing.
Oh, you're breathing. Oh, sorry. I'm like,
no,
I could say. So here we are. We're this very special class of being, not angel, not animal, human, and we have freedom. Now, in order for us to be truly in the image of God, we truly have to have real freedom. Real freedom only means that I have a real choice to love and obey my Creator. And so we have been created to be able to choose right from wrong. You and I have that ability, and that's what makes us different. Like we talked about at one of the podcasts, our cats and our dogs, they don't have a choice. They're programmed, right? You and I are not programmed. We are very different. We can choose right and wrong. And so what happens with our freedom, unfortunately, this beautiful gift of freedom has been used and turned now for self-interest, for revenge, and for the mirage of autonomy, right? We think, I can do it. I don't need help. Me. Look, the whole Frank Sinatra, I'm going to do it my way. And I think that's where we're at in this freedom of being able to choose right from wrong. And so in that world, in that process of choosing, we can choose truly to do what he said is right or what I believe to be right. Because ultimately it comes down to, is there God or am I God? And that's the struggle we see, because if God said, then I should obey and I should have love towards that being. If no God, or if I am God, then I can choose my own. And that's what we're seeing today. We're seeing the evil that rises up when I do things my way.
Yeah.
I want to take this person out because they have spoken vocally about my worldview or my choices. I don't like them. I hate them. They should die. Right.
Yeah.
And that is making an evil decision based on something that's challenged to my core because I believe that I am God.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier how there's a difference between pain and suffering and then evil. And we kind of talked about how evil really is a result of our human freedom and choice that God's given us. What would you say to someone who sees the problem of pain and suffering and says, like, how could God allow your dad to drown when you're 17 years old? Like, he might not have caused it, but he allowed it. And if he's good, how could he do that?
Yeah. And the answer to that through the biblical worldview is it's this whole concept of now but not yet. Now I have life now but not yet. I don't have complete life. I don't have complete understanding. We're not complete beings. It's one of the reasons why within the context of the church, this concept of hope is powerful. If you look at the triads we talked about earlier, there's faith, hope, and love. Okay. And if you look at the bookends that Paul sets for us there's faith, and faith looks back towards what was done in the past. Hope is also trust. So the words are both trust. But faith has its focus on what was done in the past. So I trust what was done in the past. Hope trusts what's going to happen in the future. Okay? And so those bookends are massively important. So to answer that question, how can I live in the context of a loving God that would allow my dad to drown when I'm 17? Because the hope that I have and the promise in the hope of the future, right? And our ultimate hope is in the resurrection of even ourselves, right? We will be resurrected into what we call a glorified state, which we never got into because we did justification, sanctification. But that third phase of humanity, it actually deals with the body itself, the particles, will be set glorified. There's a future hope. So I can look to the future and know, no, this isn't the way it is. This will all be set right. Even Paul in Romans says the whole creation groans and it's waiting for the revelation of you and I to be glorified. The creation itself is waiting for that moment. That is our hope. And I think in the church oftentimes we don't really hope. I hope it doesn't rain, on my wedding. I hope it doesn't, right?
True.
And we trivialize, not that that's trivial, but we trivialize the word hope, not realizing that our hope, like that song, our hope is based on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness, right? That is our hope of now, but not yet. It's not yet fully revealed of the way things are going to be set right in the future. And so we live with that hope. There's the great movie Shawshank Redemption. The whole movie's a movie on hope, right? His hope is Nehu. He's gonna go slog through all this pain and suffering and knowing what he's gonna see the white sands and the blue ocean of Nehu. That's the kind of a Hollywood version of a hope for you and I. I can live through the loss of my dad. I can live through pain and suffering and even evil done to me in a world that's fallen, knowing this isn't the way it's going to be. Now, if I'm an atheist, I don't have that. I'm just lost in the mechanics of the universe. Good for me, or it sucks for me, but that's just what it is. But you and I have been told, and we believe that there is better. There will be set free. The pain and suffering, the evil that is going on right now will be done away with in a future event, and it will.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like something that I really wanted to talk about, I guess, on the episode today is more like how should we respond as Christians to all these things happening, but also like how can we be more bold going forward in our faith? Because I feel like something like that happening would want to set a lot of us back out of fear. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it should do the opposite. I feel like we should be all the more bold to share the gospel because of what happened, or at least that's how I feel. But again, like not everybody feels that way, and being a Christian in this day and age can be something that's now scary, and we're putting our lives on the line to share about the gospel, but it's what he's called us to do. So I guess I would just ask, like, what would be your advice to people of all ages, or just Christians in general, to like continue to share the gospel in the world that we live in, and with how evil it's still continuing to be.
Yeah. And Rachel, you know what I'm going to do to you on that one? I'm going to say, what do you mean by that? I'm just going to, because I love that you guys keep doing that to me, and I love that. Please keep that up in all conversations. So what do you mean by gospel, right? We use the word gospel in a church setting, and we shouldn't, because it's not a church word. Mm-hmm. Gospel just means good news. And when we use the Greek word euangelion, it's the good news of what? So in the marketplace, back in their culture, they didn't have, they didn't have podcasts, they didn't have newspapers. They would come to the marketplace and say, hey, figs are $12 for $1 today. And so you'd come to the common area and how
Commune
many? Exactly. So the good news was someone standing up saying, hey, here's news for the day, euangelion for the day. Jesus came and brought good news, brought gospel. And what happens with that is exactly what we've been talking about, setting evil right. Here's the beautiful thing. In the whole plan of humanity, right, we were created in the image of God. We're less than God, so we're going to mess up. He knew that. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like, oh, crud, we made this human race and they chose their own thing. He absolutely 100% knew you and I, because we're less than God, we would choose our own selfish desires, our revenge, our mirage of autonomy, like we talked about. We would choose that. He knew that. So what did he do? He had a plan for it. What was the plan? It was the good news. What is the good news? The good news was the fact that he himself would take on the carbon suit and, as an example of perfection, say, it is possible to walk this earth, never taking my eyes off my Father, never being evil, never doing wrong. He was killed for it ultimately. Thankfully, he rose from the dead, conquered death, conquered. So the answer to evil has been dealt with. And that's the beautiful truth of Christianity. And that, to me, is the good news. Yeah. If we could be shouting from the rooftops that this pain, this suffering, this evil, this is temporary. Yeah. It will be set right. Right? That's the hope that you and I, that's the good news. Yeah. The good news is that we don't have to live. I don't have to live with the pain and the loss of my dad. Yeah, I still miss my dad. I still can't show him, how many crab came up in the crab pot, or how big the salmon was that I caught. I would love to do that. So I miss that side of it, but I know. Yeah. And I am 100% convinced I will get to see my dad someday, right? Yeah. That's the hope that you and I share. Yeah. The world doesn't have that. Yeah. The world's like, I hope it doesn't rain. I hope I'm alive tomorrow. I hope I don't get fired, right? Their hope is very trivial in the moment, not that they have this massive hope that you and I do of someday walking face to face with Jesus and seeing the creation without the fall. I mean, that is going to be amazing when we get to see that. Yeah. So your question to me, how would you be more vocal? How would I, based on what we have gone through over the past week? Number one is go back to what Jesus said, speak the truth in love, right? You guys know this. You asked me early on one of the podcasts, where should we read? And I think books like Total Truth and books like that, like the Nancy Pearcey book we talked about, when we go back to Finding Truth or Total Truth from Nancy Pearcey, or just the concept of truth itself, what do we mean by truth, right? The way things really are. And I think it is time to be bold and say, this is the way things really are. This is why evil, and this is why evil has been dealt with and will be set right ultimately. But right now, you and I are going to walk through this life. And I think, how do we do that in love? Now, one of the things when I listen to Charlie Kirk, I resonate with him at a deep level on the apologetic side of things. I mean, I listen to multiple things on his, his biology, which is funny because I listen to his biology and I'm like, he's spot on, right? When you look at biology, there are two sexes, and that might be offensive to some. I don't know why.
I don't care
because there's an XX and an XY. And I was even asking my wife